On a scorching afternoon in the middle of nowhere, a little girl's scream cut through the desert air like a knife. Her motorcycle had flipped. Her body lay still on the burning asphalt. And 50 hardened bikers, men who'd seen violence, death, and every kind of hell, stood frozen in absolute terror because not one of them knew how to save her. But one man did. An old man with trembling hands, a shattered past, and a ghost he'd been chasing for 20 years. And as he dropped to his knees beside the unconscious child, pressing his weathered palms against her tiny chest, nobody knew that this broken father was about to find something he thought he'd lost forever. If you believe in never giving up, the unbreakable bond between fathers and sons, and miracles that happen on lonely highways, please like this video, share it, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring powerful true-style stories like this to life. The old man's name was Frank Castellano. 70 years old. Face carved deep with lines of grief. He'd been riding Route 66 for 6 straight days, showing a faded photograph to every stranger he met, asking the same question he'd asked 10,000 times before, "Have you seen this boy?" The boy in the photo was 12 years old. Dark eyes. Crooked smile. His son. Michael. 20 years ago, Michael had vanished. Not died, vanished. One moment he was laughing on the back of Frank's Harley, the next he was gone, thrown from the bike during a crash, his body disappearing into a canyon below the highway. Search teams found nothing. No body. No trace. Authorities declared him dead. But Frank never believed it. Something deep in his bones told him his son was alive somewhere, breathing, living, just lost. So Frank searched. For 2 decades, he rode from state to state, town to town, showing that photograph, refusing to let go. His wife left him. His friends told him to move on. Doctors said he was in denial. But Frank kept riding. Now, on this 6th day of what he'd promised himself would be his final journey, fate threw him a curveball. The little girl, no more than 8 years old, had been riding a small dirt bike too fast on the shoulder of the highway. She'd lost control. The bike flipped. She hit the pavement hard. And the 50 bikers traveling in the opposite direction, a club called the Desert Reapers, screeched to a halt. Frank's group, 15 motorcycles strong, stopped too. The girl wasn't moving. Blood trickled from her nose. Her chest was still. The Desert Reapers' leader, a massive man covered in tattoos and leather, dropped beside her, his huge hands hovering uselessly over her small body. "Someone do something," he shouted, panic cracking his voice. "Somebody help her." Nobody moved. 50 men, all frozen by fear and helplessness. Frank pushed through the crowd. His knees cracked as he knelt beside the girl. His hands, scarred from decades of gripping handlebars, settled gently on her chest. And then he started pressing. Steady. Rhythmic. Counting silently in his head the way he'd learned years ago during a first aid course he'd taken after Michael disappeared, swearing he'd never be helpless again. 1. 2. 3. 4. Sweat dripped down Frank's weathered face. His arms burned. His back screamed. But he didn't stop. The bikers stood in a silent circle around him, engines off, the desert holding its breath. 15 compressions. Breathe into her mouth. 15 more. Frank's vision blurred. His chest tightened. But his hands kept moving, kept pushing life back into this little stranger's body because he couldn't save his own son 20 years ago, and maybe, just maybe, saving her would mean something. Then the girl gasped. A sharp, desperate gulp of air that sounded like the most beautiful thing Frank had ever heard. Her eyes fluttered open. She coughed, confused, terrified. The Reaper's leader scooped her up, tears streaming down his scarred face, holding her like she was made of glass. "You're okay, baby," he whispered, his voice shaking. "You're okay. Frank sat back on his heels, exhausted, chest heaving. He didn't wait for thanks. He stood slowly, his joints protesting, and started walking back to his bike. But a hand grabbed his shoulder. The Reaper's leader stood there, this giant of a man, tears still wet on his face. "You saved my daughter," he said, voice thick with emotion. "What's your name?" "Frank." "Frank what?" "Frank Castellano." The leader stared at him for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. "Castellano," he repeated slowly. "You got family around here?" Frank's throat tightened. "Had a son. Lost him 20 years ago. Been looking ever since." The leader's eyes widened. He turned to one of his crew, a younger man leaning against a motorcycle at the edge of the crowd, and shouted, "Ghost. Get over here." The young man looked up. 30-something. Dark hair. Leather vest covered in patches. A scar cutting across his forehead. He walked over slowly, cautiously. Frank's heart stopped. Those eyes. He knew those eyes. "This man just saved my daughter's life," the leader said. "His name's Castellano. Says he lost a son 20 years ago." He paused, looking between Frank and Ghost. "You ever remember your real name, Ghost?" Ghost stared at Frank, his face pale, confused. "No," he said quietly. "I woke up in a hospital 15 years ago. No memory. No ID. They called me Ghost because I didn't exist." Frank's hands trembled as he pulled the photograph from his jacket. The edges were worn, the image faded, but the face was clear. A 12-year-old boy with dark eyes and a crooked smile. He held it out. Ghost took it. Stared. His fingers traced the boy's face, then his own scar, then back to the photo. "That's me," Ghost whispered, his voice breaking. That's my face." Frank's vision blurred with tears. "Your name is Michael. You're my son." The desert went silent again. 50 bikers, hardened men who'd seen everything, stood witness as a father and son, torn apart by tragedy and reunited by a miracle on a lonely highway, stared at each other across 20 years of loss. Michael's hands shook. I don't remember." "You don't have to," Frank said, his voice cracking. "I remember enough for both of us." And then, with the sun setting behind them and 2 biker crews watching in stunned silence, Frank Castellano stepped forward and wrapped his arms around the son he thought he'd lost forever. Michael hesitated for only a second before holding him back. The Reaper's leader wiped his eyes and started clapping. Slowly, the rest joined in. Both crews, once strangers, now bound by something bigger than territory or rivalry. They clapped for Frank. For Michael. For second chances and roads that lead us home even when we don't know the way. Over the next days, Frank and Michael rode together. Michael's memory didn't flood back all at once, but pieces emerged. A laugh. A phrase. The smell of Frank's leather jacket triggering something deep and familiar. They talked for hours at gas stations and diners, filling in gaps, rebuilding what was shattered. And when Frank finally reached the end of Route 66, he wasn't alone anymore. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue telling meaningful stories that remind the world that some bonds can never be broken, no matter how much time passes or how far we drift. And before this story ends, tell us in the comments, what would you say to Frank if you could meet him today?